Hey guys, welcome back to Medical Coding with Blue. All right, so obviously I did not get to post Quiz Friday. I was going to post it on Saturday, but Saturday I was decorating my Christmas tree and I had company over, so I did not get a chance to. It didn't go as quickly as I thought it was going to go, so I was like, okay, well, I will just reserve it for this coming Friday. Everybody can just have this weekend off. No Quiz Friday this weekend, but of course, I will be back for another exciting episode on Monday. I also have been behind on Vlogmas. I am so sorry. But I got another episode of that coming up. Today I'll be filming that. But this episode, I wanted to talk about giving provider education. Okay, so I got a request for how I do my provider classes. And I think this is something that is very important to go over because of the simple fact that it is part of our job as medical coders to do provider education. Now, in some places, it is one person that is solely responsible for the provider education because it'll be like a clinical documentation improvement specialist that will do that. And so the coders would just only code. But I think it is important to be able to know how to communicate and know how to give a class if you have to give a class. Because communication is very, very, very important in what we do. Okay. So let's talk about how some of the good habits to pick up when doing a class. First, you want to make sure that when you are giving a class that you do a slideshow, okay? Now, I typically try to do my classes to be 1 hour, okay? That is standard time of what I ask. Sometimes you'll only get 30 minutes, but I really always ask for 1 hour. I advocate for that because you actually do need an hour. Once the providers start to relax and open up, there's going to be lots of questions. So, whenever I'm working on a slide deck for a class, I will usually pick no more than 3 topics to talk about. Now, if you have providers that have lots of issues, maybe they've never had a coder before, and maybe their documentation is just all over the place, and there's just a lot of things that need to be improved, you want to pick the first 3 topics that are most pressing, okay? Because you don't want to throw a lot of information at providers the first time you meet them. You want that initial meeting or any meeting with them to be as positive as possible. Now, it's not always going to happen that way. There's going to be some days where they talk with you and they're very stressed out, or something that you are bringing to them is stressing them out. But you want to try to shoot for as best communication, as most positive communication as possible, okay? And by doing that, you want to make sure when you're bringing something to them that it is what is most pressing. So like I said, if you're giving a class, it's 1 hour, shoot for no more than 3 topics to talk about, okay? And when you're doing your slide deck, make sure that it is no more than 15 slides, okay? And by that, I mean not a bunch of words. Don't get verbose, which is what I did. I was guilty of that because I would put a lot of what I wanted to say into the slides when I was first starting out. But then I learned that as time goes on, you learn what is received better. Not that my slides didn't get received when they were very verbose, but it just makes it cleaner and neater for people when they are having to go back and reference these things, what the main bullet points are. So, like I said, no more than 15 slides to a deck, because I've seen coders who were very proud of their 60-page slide decks that they were using, or 50 pages. And if you are giving a class and you hand a provider a stack of a slide deck that has 40 or 50 or 60 pages to it, they're going to freak out. And they are not going to listen after the first 2 minutes. You have a good first impression time frame, okay? And by that, I mean the first 10 minutes, okay? That you got to be able to grab their attention. Because if not, in those 2 minutes, of that 10 minutes, they're done. They will not listen to you. They will be looking off into the ceiling or looking on their phones or whatever. You've got 10 good minutes that you got to make your case in order to keep their attention. Okay? So you have to set it up for the most positive experience possible. Because if you're going into a meeting and you're handing out this very thin slide deck, but it is very, got a lot of good information in it, and it's very small, they'll be more receptive. Okay, this isn't going to hurt so bad. We're not going to sit here. This isn't going to be so much of a pain. Okay. Another thing I like to do when I'm setting up for a class is I like to bring in something small. Candy, cookies. I like to make something. I've been having a lot of success with these little mini cheesecakes, which is 3 ingredients, and it is very easy to make. But it looks like $1,000,000, and you walk out a winner because everybody's like, oh, they weren't expecting that. Okay. So anything to sort of bring them to, oh, everybody can just relax. This is just a meeting. We're all just talking. We're basically visiting like friends, because you are not going to want to be in a meeting. Think about how you would feel. You're not going to want to be in a meeting where somebody's telling you, you're not going to want that. You are going to want to listen to somebody that is having a conversation with you, not somebody that is talking at you. And I've seen coders make this mistake of, well, they're going to go in there with, all this attitude, and, they just want to, show their dominance. No, 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 no. No. Most providers, when you are working in a medical environment, there are going to be alpha females and alpha males. That is how they roll, which is understandable because they have people's lives in their hands, okay? And you have to show respect for that. I tell them all the time, a lot of coders, sometimes they get an attitude when a provider gets an attitude with them. And sometimes it's very hard because it's a human reactionary thing to get defensive when you feel somebody is getting defensive with you. The main thing you got to try to do is learn to control your own behavior when you are around providers. So that you want them to be the most receptive that they can be. And that starts with you. You have to be able to set the groundwork. So like I said, starting with a small slide deck and starting with maybe like a little snacks, like water or something like that. It doesn't have to be anything great and big, you know what I mean? It doesn't have to be a whole big, huge thing, but just something to get them to relax. Because a lot of times, providers are so busy taking care of their patients and other people that they don't have time, or they don't take the time to take care of themselves. So something like, hey, can I offer you a water? Or, I brought these, and please help yourselves. That's something that'll bring the attitude down, okay? So now we're starting to have a conversation with each other. Next thing is, when you're giving a class, I do not read the slides. I always have my providers read to me because I already know what I wrote. And a lot of times, especially when you are giving a class and maybe you're meeting some new providers, if they don't know you, they're not going to want to listen to somebody that they don't know. A lot of times, like auditory, they're listening to somebody that they know or that they are familiar with. They're more likely to listen to them and their voice than somebody that they don't know. And if you are meeting new providers, or if this is your first time giving a class, go shake hands. Shake hands with every provider that walks in that room. Work that room prior to the meeting starting, saying, hey, hi, how you doing? Introduce yourself. Let them know that you're glad that they came, and, please help themselves if you brought anything. And just tell them that you look forward to working with them. Anything, just sort of start breaking the ice. But introducing yourself is very huge. And above everything else, if you listen to anything from this video, it is whatever you do, when you are shaking hands with a provider, do not. And this doesn't even have to be limited to just providers in the medical field. It can be any professional in any environment that is actually having to give education or give a class. Do not give the dead fish handshake, whatever you do. If you give the dead fish handshake, you've already lost the room. If you don't know how to shake hands, you need to practice, okay? Shaking hands, that is your first contact with a provider or somebody that you're trying to give education to. That is your first contact. You do not want it to be this little dead fish handshake, and you know what I'm talking about. That little one that, you barely touch each other's hand, and then you're just like, kind of like, it's a real limp little, no, 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 no. No. You need to go in there, shake hands. It is a nice grip. It's not where I'm going to break your hand. It is a nice grip and saying hello. Look them in the eye and say, hello, it's nice to meet you. I'm, whoever your name is. Thank you for coming. I appreciate you being in this class with me today. And I'm looking forward to sharing this information with you. Something, anything, just like I said, work that room, talk to everybody, shake hands with everybody, because that's going to tell them, okay, now this person, they mean business. And immediately be welcoming to them, okay? Because you want to start that conversation in a positive way. Sometimes providers, when they hear that they have to go to a class with a coder, oh, here we go. They always want us to change things. They always want us to do these things, and this is always going to be a disaster. But when you go and you're charming and you present yourself well and you have information that is to the point, that provider is going to know you're not wasting their time. Okay? Like I said, I always have them read the slides to me because I already know what I wrote. And so this gives them a chance to look and be active in the conversation, okay? I always try to make it like a conversation, never like a lecture. That's the thing too. You never want to be like lecture, because have you seen people who give lectures? You see what happens to the audience? Sometimes they start to fall asleep because sometimes the presenter's voice starts to get monotone, and they don't mean to, I think, sometimes. But sometimes it just happens and you're just and you start to fall asleep. That's not what you want. So if the providers know that they are supposed to be reading, what happens is I tell them in the beginning, all right, you all have a choice. We can start at one end of the room and people just take turns reading the slides, or I can call on you and you never know who's going to be next. So usually they go with the first option of they take turns, down the line, because nobody wants to be caught off guard, but I give them that choice, okay? And when they start reading from one slide, after they finish that slide, we stop and then we talk about whatever was in the slide. Or I'll ask, is that clear? Does that make sense? Or I will go ahead and give an example of whatever I was talking about in that slide. So if you are prepared and you don't have to use notes, that's okay. It looks better if you don't use your own notes, because then they'll know, well, she or he is speaking from the heart and this is very genuine, and they don't have to be like, oh gosh, where's my notes? Where's my note cards? It's okay to use note cards, especially if it is your first time doing this, but just try to be as relaxed as possible, and that's the sort of energy that you're going to be able to put off, and they're going to want to listen to you more because it's like a conversation, instead of like a lecture. Okay, so that is very important to remember. I like to give examples anytime I am given a slide. They're talking about the slides, and when we stop on that page, I'll give an example, and usually that will open them up as well, because a lot of times what you'll get, if you ask if there are any questions, is you get deer in the headlights. Nobody wants to ask. There are some providers that do not care. They will ask anyway, but there's a lot of providers that will not ask, and they will be very just like, oh, I don't have any questions. No, I'm good. This is when you have to do that post-meeting, maybe catching them in the hallway later or strolling by their office and say, hey, how did you like the class? Do you have any questions from it? That kind of thing. So you never want to put a provider on the spot, because a lot of times, like I said, they're not going to want to ask questions when they're in a class, because I've heard this before, nobody wants to look stupid in front of their peers, which I don't think they would look stupid, but then whatever. But that's just me and my thought process on that one. But yes, always be clear to the point when you're giving a class. And if you are nervous, say it. Just tell them, hey, you know what, guys, this is my first time doing a class, so I am very nervous. So if I start stuttering or if I start sweating profusely, please excuse me. And usually you get a good chuckle out of the audience, because they'll be like, oh, okay, and then they can relax a little bit. Okay, but whatever you do not lose control over the room. If you see people talking, or if you see people that are just not engaged, sort of try to bring them back into the conversation in a very polite way. And it can be just a look. If you have people that are talking while somebody else is talking, you can just sort of kind of look at them, and they'll feel it and they'll know. And usually if they don't see it, their partner next to them will be like, hey, listen, and then like, oh, sorry, so, and then you can just smile politely and go back to the conversation, with whoever was asking a question. So always try to keep that in mind, because you want them to be able to pay attention to you and what the information that you are giving to them. Never ever lose control of the room. Okay, that is the number one golden rule, is do not lose control over the room. Okay, but always keep them engaged. If you see that there's somebody that like has a question, maybe ask them something to sort of bring out that question, bring out, whatever's on their mind. It could be anything, whatever's the topic is about. You want to make sure that they fully understand. And sometimes when I'm giving a class and I have a question in there and I go to the next slide, or we go to like 2 different slides down, I'll bring back that question if it looks like it was confusing. Okay, so then we can just sort of discuss that more. Okay, but a lot of times what happens is after a meeting, it will be like, I will get a lot of people that come around me saying, when you were talking, I do have a question about this or that. And it's totally fine. Okay, this is when you can have that one-on-one. Okay, because again, they're not going to want to share their questions with a room full of their peers, okay? Because they don't want to look like they know less than the next person, okay? So you kind of have to work with that a little bit. It's just part of the territory. It is just what happens. And after a while, after you start getting them used to you and being around and giving classes, the classes will be better. They'll be much more interactive, but don't be too hard on yourself if you feel like you didn't really truly connect with a lot of them during your first class. That will sometimes happen. Sometimes meetings just fall flat. It just depends on what is going on and the temperature of the room. If they are particularly stressed out, or if there's a huge project going on or something, sometimes that will affect your ability to be able to connect with these providers. Okay, same thing goes if you have classes with nurses. I do occasionally do classes with nurses. Now, nurses, for some reason, I have a little bit of a harder time to connect with them, and that is something that I am actively working on. I'm not really sure why there's a disconnect sometimes with nurses, but sometimes I mean, literally, I can talk to a provider and ask them, hey, do you have any questions, when we're one-on-one, and they're totally cool with it. But and they'll start asking questions, but for some reason nurses just don't. They're like, no, they're okay, But then you find out later that they did have a question, so it's just like, okay. We need to work on this communication a little bit more. So you will find that sometimes, but it's just something that you just gotta have to work with. I've been in it for over 10 years. I'm still working with it. So, but once you start working at those kinks, it'll get a lot better. But it is fun. I do love doing provider classes. That is one of my most favorite things to do. Maybe one day I will do a class where I'm filming myself and giving this presentation where you all can see it, see me in action. So, but that's going to take some approval to do. So we'll see. We'll see what I can do, whatever I can come up with. So, But yes, that is what I recommend when you are doing provider classes. And always just relax. Just relax and just have a good time with it. You know, they are people. They put their pants on one leg at a time, just like you and me, okay? And some providers are a little bit more nerve-wracking than others, because they can be very intimidating. Uh, and that is just something that just happens, you know. And so once you start getting around them and taking the time to get to know them, it will get easier, okay? But always keep in mind the good firm handshake, and you're connecting with the eyes, okay? Look them in the eyes, shake their hands, and give it a little small squeeze, okay? But don't do the dead fish handshake. I can't stand the dead fish handshake. That irritates me so bad when I see somebody do that. It's just like, why? It's like, you know, that is your first impression of somebody. You know, that's going to tell you about that person, okay? One other thing I wanted to recommend. Okay, aside from medical coding and aside from all of your knowledge that you got to have in public speaking, I think another bonus thing to learn or to work on learning is body language. I have read many books on body language, and while some people may think that, oh, that's not really important, it is, because this will tell you what the temperature of the room is, and this will tell you if people are being receptive to you or not. It'll let you know if their attention is waning, or if you really do have their attention. Okay, so that is something that's very important. I will be posting pictures of some of the titles that I have, some of the books that I own about body language, because it is very important. And just so you know, when you're shaking hands and maybe somebody, like, you know, they do like the two hand grip handshake, right? Like, if you ever have somebody like they're shaking your hand, and they like grip your arm or something like that as well at the same time, that means they want something from you, okay? Whatever it is. And you'll see this a lot of times with salespeople, people, you know, selling cars or selling houses and things like that. They'll do that, okay? So that's when you know, okay, this person wants something from me, okay? Not to say that this is what you should do with your providers. I'm just saying, okay? But these are some things to recognize, and this will let you know how receptive this person is. But that first handshake is always very important. And if you don't have a good handshake down, practice, work with other people and say, hey, how's my handshake? You know, and again, you don't want to be too strong, but you want to be firm enough where you know that you're looking them in the eye, and they're, everybody's engaged. So that's very important. But these little things will come with time. You'll be able to pick this up with time. And of course, I always suggest and strongly suggest to be very well dressed anytime you're giving a provider class. Okay, these providers got to know that you are there and you mean business. Okay, that you're not there to just be like, hey man, I'm just here, and we're going to talk about coding. And do not go in jeans, period. There is no excuse for giving a provider class in jeans. Okay, so but that's that's my episode for today, so I will go ahead and wrap this one up. But if you have any more questions, and I will be doing more about provider education and provider leading classes and things like that, and doing one-on-ones, because one-on-ones is really important as well. And when you are working one-on-one with a provider, of course, now your audience is one, okay? And so there's a lot more attentiveness that's got to be there. And so, and creating that good connection so that you can communicate effectively, and the provider knows that you're there to support them, and you're there and you're on their side, that is very important. And those one-on-ones are really good for that. So I will be talking about that on another episode as well. So I will go ahead and wrap this one up. But if you are a medical coder, a medical coding student, somebody curious about the fascinating world of medical coding, a provider or a nurse, I invite you to like and subscribe and follow me on my journey in medical coding. Okay, I will see y'all on the next video. Bye!